scientists increasingly believe that climate change is making hurricanes stronger and more
planet-warming
destructive.
pollution
And the
from
reason for
fossil
that is pretty
fuels
simple.
and
It's that the ocean
Human-caused
waters are
climate
much
change
warmer than they used to
turned up
be.
the heat
Warm ocean
for nearly
water.
2
Change is now rapid, widespread, and intensifying. That is according to a devastating report by the UN's intergovernmental.
One of the primary tenets of the so-called consensus on climate change is that increasing global temperature is harming both our Earth and ourselves. These include increasing drought, severe weather, famine, and heat waves, just to name a few. That same line of thought claims that all those calamities will become worse due to our emissions of greenhouse gases. But when you review human history in light of changes in global temperature, you see a very different picture. The real story is at odds with the warming is bad narrative. In fact, the Earth and people have always flourished during times that were much warmer than today. Scientists tell us that the coldest period of the last 10,000 years occurred fairly recently during the aptly named Little Ice Age, which only ended about 200 years ago. The very coldest temperature of this period occurred more than 300 years ago, and we've been warming in fits and starts since the late 17th century. That means that, thankfully, we're living in a period of relatively comfortable warming. Our climate has cycled through extended periods of beneficial warmth and horrific cold, resulting in dramatic changes for life on Earth. Contrary to what we have been told, it is the warm periods that emerge as humankind's friend. Dating back to the very first great civilization some 4,000 years ago, there were 3 other great periods of global warming. The first of the great human civilizations occurred during a period known as the Minoan Warm Period. That coincided with the Bronze Age. The Babylonian, Hittite, Assyrian, and Harappan empires arose, prospered, and peaked during this very warm time. Food was bountiful, and empires thrived. That all changed very quickly at the beginning of the 13th century BC, when a great decline in temperature led to crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. This cycle of alternating beneficial warming and horrific cold is a pattern replicated over the millennia since the end of the Bronze Age. This graph shows the patterns of welcome warmth and devastating cold over the past 4,000 years. It is clear from these records that the peak of each subsequent warm period has been cooler than the previous one. It's important to remember that the ancient warming periods were significantly warmer than our current warming period. During the warmer climate cycles, such as the Minoan, Roman, and medieval warm periods, humans enjoyed significant improvements in living standards. Populations grew and migrated into new regions. Food production increased thanks to longer growing seasons. Citrus crops and wine grapes were grown in England, where it is too cold for them to exist today. Olive trees were cultivated in the Rhine River Valley of Germany, where they can no longer survive because of today's climate. Romans wore togas because they could. It was warmer. And the scale and size of buildings and cities exploded. Massive cathedrals with large windows to collect the warm sunshine were constructed during the last great warming, known as the medieval warm period. During previous warm periods, sea levels were higher than today due to the melting of land-based glaciers. Seaside fortresses like Pevensey Castle were constructed along the English Channel to fend off marauders. Today, thanks to the drop in sea levels, Pevensey Castle sits nearly 1 mile inland, well away from the shore. We have more planetary ice and lower sea levels now than we did in those ancient warmer times. There are accounts that the famous Viking Eric the Red used a misleading marketing strategy to lure settlers to an icy island he called Greenland. That was around the year 985 during the medieval warm period. But as the climate cooled at the end of that warm epoch, bitter cold forced them to abandon the settlements by 1450, as the ravages of the Little Ice Age had made survival impossible. Glaciers advanced as the climate chilled. There were multiple years of crop failures, and some places became uninhabitable due to advancing ice. The growing seasons were abbreviated. Crops died, livestock perished, starvation ensued, and populations shrank as a result. Weakened by the cold and lack of food, disease spread. Frigid weather required people to wear thicker clothing and to spend longer periods indoors. Confined spaces were a perfect breeding ground for lice that carried a deadly form of typhus and for fleas that carried the bubonic plague. Immune systems distressed by prolonged cold and famine were overcome by the Black Death in the mid-14th century. Cold, disease, and starvation are estimated to have wiped out up to 50% of the population in some areas of Europe. A truth that history reveals is that we should celebrate the modest warming period we now enjoy. Eventually, the climate's natural cycle will almost certainly return extreme cold with a vengeance, and even with modern technology to blunt the effects, life will become much more difficult once again. The well-documented linkage of rising and falling temperatures and human history stands in stark contrast to the popular narrative. Clearly, we should fear the cold and welcome the warmth. The experts at the CO2 Coalition are eager to provide the truth about climate history in lieu of the popular hysteria about our current warm period. Go to our website now for the latest, up-to-date climate science.